Welcome back, Venturers. It's time for another discussion about VNs. I am MR, and together with Taurus, we have promised ourselves we will never become the slop tubers of YouTube with reaction content. But look at us now. We've had our first response video. We did embrace the dark side. What's next? Sponsorship, clickbait, Raid Shadow Legends? Anyway, we talk today about characters who became what they hated. So Taurus, tell us about that trope.
Yeah, well, first things, you said a few interesting things about other YouTubers about the whole slop and stuff. Hey, don't ever count that out. No bad mouthing. If we got a raid sponsorship in our future, guess what we'd be leading our videos with? Hey guys, check out the hit mobile game Raid Shadow Legends.
Mobile game? What are you saying? We need to sell it as a VN with gameplay.
There we go, buddy. That's how we make it happen. But anyways, that's all well and good. That's all fine and all. But this is about a little curious phenomenon that sometimes happens, you see, where characters become what they hate. That's always a very interesting moment because a good character will have a clearly defined personality. There'll be someone that you have a strong sense of the type of person they are, the beliefs they have, what they fight for and what they dislike in the world. That's your starting point for what makes a good character. And although we often associate character growth as a positive, as the character evolving and growing and becoming better in some way, well, there's also the kind of character development where this person changes into some sort of enemy of themselves who they used to be. Usually this kind of thing is, becoming an evil person. So the good guy, becomes the bad guy, whether it's a surprise reveal or where life has simply worn them down or some other shocking change has taken over them in the meantime. But either way, it's something in which the future version of this character, if they could be seen by the present version, would make them sick. And so it's a pretty interesting phenomenon, and I think it happens often enough in visual novels to where we could discuss it. What do you think, Amar?
I completely agree. Especially, I want to make a delineation of two times, or at least two ways in which it can be delivered, this trope. One, as a natural consequence of characters' development, story, some sort of a progression. Maybe they come to a breaking point. Maybe there's some sort of revelation, change of heart, whatever that might be. But also, I like how VNs sometimes showcase this trope more of a what if. So in case of some VNs, I'll give you an example of VNicle, you have a trope of becoming what they hate as a bad ending of you definitely screwed this up, you chose the bad option, and this showcases what if the main cast strays from their original goal and through the choice that you made become what they sought out to destroy in case of VNicle. So that's a title that has a very straightforward, I don't know if I can call it ladder structure, a choice system in which every single choice boils down to A or B, with A, continue the story, and B, you fucked up. You are now the evil one.
Well, I like to think that bad endings could possibly be more complicated than that,
Yes, obviously not to go into too much details of what makes those choices and those splits. But ultimately, my point is this is immediate. You don't continue the game to reach a bad ending or evil ending, but rather it's an immediate showcase, although in some titles it can be prolonged. I think in VNDP they call it bad ending with a story. They have a special tag for that.
Mm-hmm. I've always liked that about visual novels, in that, you get all the choices and you get all the what ifs, but, not usually you reach some sort of bad ending and then it just cuts it off there and you're like, okay, you messed up, go back, But I think there's a lot of opportunity for chasing down those bad endings to really flesh out what happens. Because that's the whole point of visual novels. You have options. It's a digital project. You're not wasting anyone's time or whatever. You can explore. You can see what happens. That's all the what ifs.
Yep.
You're not just limited to a linear story. Anyways, I don't want to get distracted. So, MR, what are some examples, or what are some more of your thoughts about a character becoming what they hate?
There's a lot of that trope when it comes to familial bonds. When you start story in a position which protagonist, for whatever reason, be it happened in the past, maybe something that is currently ongoing, they have a fall off from their parents, and they promise themselves, I'll not become like that bastard dad of mine who made horrific experiments to sacrifice in order to preserve his dying wife.
Oh my gosh, okay.
Over the course of the story, it comes to some sort of a karmic justice in which this character is thrown in such a situation that you need to make sacrifice to save your family, and you reenact exactly what you hated about your own parent. So that's kind of a pattern that tends to happen with familial bonds, and when you have protagonists of VNs that hate their parents. That's common enough that I've seen that plenty in VNs.
See, I was about to say, it's a pretty common experience for kids to grow up thinking, I hate my parents, he's awful. And then, the kids grow up and they realize, man, I didn't realize what it was like from their perspective. I'm more understanding now. But you really went into some interesting directions there about experimentation.
Okay. Sure, we can dial down the scope and severity of that change, sure, into some reasonable and, dare I say, real-like stories, real-life-like stories. But come on, we were talking about VNs. Obviously, I want to go with a crazier example.
Of course.
But that doesn't need to be negative, honestly, and it doesn't need to be parental related. I have one example of a title that I had said plenty negative in the past, but looking back, there was one aspect I completely glossed over. So I want to bring specifically for a moment Alchemist of Ars Magna. So it's a title in it that is set in a magical world in which protagonists with the rest of the gang attend kind of Hogwarts magical school, with their club being about environment, so saving the environment. They are the hippies, they like to hack trees and repair broken flowers. Right? So over the course of the story, you tend to run into some eco-terrorists or people who don't care about ecology. The fauna and flora doesn't matter to them. It's all machines and industry. Okay, fair enough. And you showed your hippie ways with hippie magic. In one moment, there is one temptation, so to speak, in which your character can submit to that temptation and he becomes the eco-terrorist himself. Now, that is such a jarring change. I was very critical, and honestly still am, on how it completely doesn't work with that kind of protagonist. I guess I understand there was seductive enough, someone who was seductive enough that made him question everything, but it still doesn't work with how the protagonist was established.
Hey, man, I totally believe that a guy is desperate for some chick and he completely changes himself. I believe it.
I see.
I think we've all seen it happen too many times.
Okay, so now we're talking about less of a I can fix her, it's now I can ruin him kind of situation.
It's about being a simp.
Yeah. So now you become the eco-terrorist, but this not only showcases how this character became what he hated and sought to destroy. And now he's pouring oil directly into the river as an eco-terrorist. But it grants opportunity for, let's call them bench warmers of the story, to rise up to the situation. The team B can finally go to the forefront and, honestly, futilely, but try to stop the protagonist.
Oh, so it was just the protagonist who changed and switched over, but all
Yes.
the other, supporting characters and the other gang, they stuck to their ways?
Yes, exactly. The protagonist and a couple of his closest companions, but no one else. The bench warmers and the team B, the further apart than the, let's say, main waifus, did not. So form a coalition and opposition against the evil eco-terrorist.
Interesting. Okay.
And I glossed over that part when I spoke about Ars Magna, but looking back, that was actually a lot of hype moments from the side characters came from the evil route, when you were literally pouring gasoline directly into water and turning nice white jellyfish into black abominations.
Oh, man. You gotta kick a few puppies along the way, too, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
Really hammer the point in.
Yeah.
But as far as something I can share, is that one example that came to mind is in Shizuku. And it's a pretty interesting case. I don't want to get too much into spoilers, of course, but one recurring imagery throughout Shizuku in the main character's mind is this door to insanity. And he wants to go through it, but he can never commit to going through it. It never opens for him in his mind. He idolizes it, he dreams of embracing the insanity, he awaits the day he can. But a big theme in the visual novel is about recognizing the dangers behind it. It's about appreciating the world around you instead of retreating deeper into your own, deluded and cut off mind. But there is one ending in which our main character does fully embrace that door to insanity. And even though during the route we see the dangers involved, we see the evil that can be possible, he doesn't have the same sort of, salvation that helps him out in all these other routes in embracing the better world instead. And we get to see our main character when he very much dives into that the whole Dempa aspects. And it's really surreal. Because, we see so much of the, I guess you could say, goody two-shoe act that comes later, but this is a time where insanity truly takes root inside of his mind. We see the consequences, and in very much, without going more into the specifics, he becomes something he detested so much for 80% of the rest of Shizuku visual novel. It's definitely my favorite ending among all of the routes in this title, because of the contrast and because of how easily he slips into this, even though so much was spent fighting and hating it, and just how much there's a discrepancy between the two, and yet they can still coexist in their mind and in the story. It is very interesting.
Importantly, there were a lot of signs early on of those sketches in the notebook of how that character thought about, if I had the power, I could nuke the planet.
Yeah, there's all sorts of, evil stuff that going on from villains and the bad guys that happens in most of Shizuku's plot. But our main characters, I guess you could say, flavor of depravity is about the apocalyptic destruction of the whole world just dying and exploding and getting blasted away. And even though we can clearly see that the other people are committing evil, when we do get this one ending within the main character falling into this depravity, we instead see it through his ways of destruction to everything around him. And again, I really wish I could go a lot more into depth and give a whole analytic side of things, but again, no spoilers. We want to keep this light, and I don't want to dominate this whole conversation for another hour.
I have an interesting example
Mm-hmm.
of a positive transformation. So becoming what they hate, but in a morally positive way. Okay?
Oh, yeah.
So in the past, we've discussed, I think it was in Parents episode, but a clash of ideas that lead to some sort of climactic big final fight. And the title I'm bringing an example of, it starts off with the protagonist, I hate my old dad, old man. Oh yeah, his dad, he hates him. And over the course of the story, throughout many different routes, you can see the world from the perspective of your parent, or maybe you stray away. With one route in specifically, you can stray so hard, you will come to contact and come to the clash with your old parent. You are as far apart from him as possible. You do not become what you hate. Yet. But what that showcases is the path to ruin is not embracing the ideals of your parent, and the way the true route is constructed, you mend your ways, you become more acquainted, and you go into the footsteps of your dad and become the best soldier version of and the most moral person on battlefield. And only through that you achieve the ideal outcome. And that was super sweet to see that if you don't stick into the old ways of the military doctrine and you become more open-minded as your dad was, that leads to the salvation. That was the true ending about. Like, I really like that because ultimately, yeah, you became what the early on in the story, you declared, I hate my dad for it. But yeah, but you've seen the battlefield, you've seen the terrors of what transpires on the ground. And if through those lenses you change your perspective, you start thinking more like your dad did. And if you follow his footsteps, yes, you can become someone better than just common foot soldier that just follows orders.
Oh.
And that was beautiful. Like the trope of becoming what they hate not necessarily have to be about corruption of ideals or becoming a worse person. It could actually be about how your initial hate was misguided. And becoming what you hate is actually a positive change.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I just want to add in. There's also just, something classic like Lunaria. How you have our main character who's a racer online, and he's a star, and he's known for rejecting corporate sponsorships because he's a lone wolf. He doesn't need help, it's just him against the world. And then, of course, he meets Lunar Q, and they grow close, and she's his biggest fan, and she helps him out a ton, and then he learns the meaning of friendship. And by the end, he's like, oh, my friends are wonderful, and they are just as much a part of my victory as me. It's the exact kind of, groupie attitude towards winning that the original guy at the start would have hated. In a sense, he became the kind of competitor that he detests.
So he started also as an ultra edgy lone wolf. I don't need no help. And over the course of a very anime story, he got hit with the power of friendship beam and became the socialite, right?
Oh, man, exactly. It's like how you said how the idea of becoming something you hate, it kind of necessarily sounds like you're becoming an evil person who you would have been ashamed of. But it's also possible to be the other way. It's possible for the original main character to be, very misguided or immature in a way. And then by the end, they have the character growth, they realize how mistaken they were, and they truly become a better person in just every sense of the word of character growth. So I do like that there's multiple aspects to it. It's not necessarily that you're saying that character growth has to be positive or becoming what you hate has to be negative. It's just like any other element in a story. It's a tool to be used to its greatest potential. And I think that's something that makes storytelling so good, especially in visual novels.
Yeah. I have to say, for all the faults I had with Tokyo Neko, because I had to bring this title in, especially in the topic as jarring and full of resentment. Not necessarily hated, but resentment a lot of the time to ideals. One of the protagonists, Echika, it's written weirdly and read very weirdly. Her that represents everything she hates, even though the more you read the story, the one thing at least that keeps coming up to my mind is they are super alike all the time. The only one thing she has that represents her rejection is the way how she deals with problems in this setting, specifically dealing with zombies. Right? Her dad developed the most optimal fighting style of killing zombies with kind of gun kata, fighting with guns, close combat, but also firing at the same time. And she says, no, I will never use that. I'll have my trusty chainsaw to solve all my problems. But throughout the whole story, specifically with the 4 branch routes, you can see permutation of emotions, because that's the biggest split in Tokyo Necro, of emotional state for 2 main protagonists. They can either still retain human emotions or become fighting machines. And in both variants of Echika, she's so close to how her father sees the world. It's crazy. That's why when I spoke about Tokyo Necro, I think I am not most fun when characters' defining moment is I have daddy issues, but her character development is so good and her arc is so compelling. I'll give her a pass. You know what? You convinced me. That's a good way of showing that.
Mm-hmm. And that's something that creates, one of the most memorable parts of their character arc, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because she, as a symbol of rebellion, shows, yeah, I have emotions, I'm radical, I'm rebellious, and her dad is stoic, professional, very optimized in his movements, both in combat and from strategic point. He also always has a plan. But that's so surface level. If you really look into both characters, he cares and she also plans. So they both share more that they let on. And in those routes in which you have more introspective both characters, it becomes so much more apparent when Echika becomes more machine-like. She becomes almost exactly like that. And in those redemption moments in which she can reach out to his humanity, that he shows some emotions, it's almost shown outright how closely they mirror each other. So it's a funny way, because that's not necessarily they almost are what they hate, just not admitting that fully.
So in a
that's
sense,
what makes it compelling.
Yeah, they already are, but how much of it is mental?
Yes, that's my point. That the Echika, however much she says, as the protagonist of the story, I am not like my dad, I will never become. In many ways, she already is. Sometimes she is just not aware, and sometimes she just lies to herself in order to presume and continue that rebellion that she will not be. Probably her arc was so much better than the other protagonists. Like, wow, that one was super compelling.
Now, I have a question for you. Do you think that in the sense of becoming what they hate being a bad thing, in succumbing to evil, do you think the main character having a certain friend or mentor or heroine is the key to preventing this? Like, I know the main one for me is Shizuku, because I just talked a lot about how the main character in one ending very much becomes something they hate. And in my opinion, it's the one where he just never truly experiences love. And so you could argue that it's experiencing love is what sets him on the right path. But how much of that, do you think is true in general, or just with the ones that you've been talking about, MR?
So that question boils down how much of an anchor to that kind of development can be pointed to other characters than just main characters changing. How can they contribute?
Wow. Yeah, okay.
I mean, a ton. Like one of the examples, and probably the first one I brought for this discussion, is from Blade Blue, in how we see the character of 9 from early age as a victim of her dad's experiment. She becomes resentful of that. She will never become an immoral character that sacrifices others for the sake of her own family. Spoiler, she does that. But she realized that she became what she hates because her own daughter confronts her about it. Obviously, this is an example that showcases other characters showing the cycle. You're asking me about character that maybe prevent the worst case scenario, some sort of pillar of morality, or maybe accelerator in case the change is positive. Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, even in the things like Alchemist of Ars Magna, however cheesy that is, major point of rejecting being an eco-terrorist is because he is surrounded by people who believe that nature is beautiful and we want to see butterflies. And the route that leads him to embracing eco-terrorism is the one that he's alone in his beliefs. And then he's kind of loved bombed by someone who says, yeah, do it, and pour all that oil to the river. I'd say it takes.
Yeah, that's a
depends on the story, but it depends on the story. But I think what you ask is legit. Like a lot of side characters or the characters that orbit around the protagonist have influence of whether or not he will change, or the protagonist will change, and maybe even adjust the moral framework on which that hatred or discontent is rooted in. And yeah, it can be as cheesy as someone gave me the salt shaker and no one ever gave me salt shaker, so now I fall in love and I will not become evil.
Yes, there's always that classic cop-out.
Yeah.
You see, that's a dramatic fight between the two good guys, and it gets broken up by, suddenly the emotions flooding through my chest. We need to work together. Yeah. So there's a whole lot of interactions that characters can have, yeah, and it's important. I feel like it's always important to have that kind of anchor, to have someone who recognizes, the main character struggles and what's going on, and provides a way out in that emotional, context. Yeah.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be necessarily, romantic love. It can be a bromance, as you've seen in Criminal Border. You had the biggest bromance to prevent the main protagonist from becoming a vessel of vengeance.
Criminal Border is an interesting one, definitely, because there are several points in that series where the main character could be going down a very interesting path, one that he might not be the smartest idea, but he has a variety of characters who help pull his head out of his ass.
Yeah, and that was pretty much the topic around the fourth volume, how on the brink the protagonist seems to be to some of the characters. So it was definitely in line of your question that yes, he had enough on an anchor in other people who prevented the worst case scenario of the protagonist transformation.
So all in all, definitely intriguing concept, huh?
Absolutely.
That is why I like visual novels. They have a lot of literary aspects to them, and you get to see a lot of great storytelling.
Yeah, and even though I'm weak, I love my good endings, I also appreciate the bad endings, exploring what ifs, that moral compass and quandary of the protagonist has been challenged and how they would completely flip. So, I appreciate the VN's showing what could have been.
Happy ending. I'm a sucker.
Yeah, happy endings
I'm a sucker
ever.
for the endings where everything worked out well at the end and all the characters are smiling in the sunset. I'm a sucker for those two.
Yeah.
I like them.
Yeah, I know that those harem endings don't have the highest reputation, but yeah, I like when everybody's happy, so I like those, okay?
But yeah, awesome episode. Thank you all very much for listening in. I hope you enjoyed, and let us know if you've got any examples too of a character becoming what they hate.
Yeah, I'm curious if anybody has some examples. And on that note, thanks for all our listeners. VNture out.
VNture out.